My name is Ephraim, son of a respected merchant, and in recent years, I've come to be known in our community as a scholar of hidden arts, a title that people only whisper in the alleyways of Jerusalem. This city, vibrant and chaotic, pulses with the sense of spice, voices, and rumors. In the markets and the courtyards of the synagogues, we study Torah and Kabbalah, though I must admit, my curiosity has taken me beyond common scripture, leading me to ancient, yellowed texts that pass from hand to hand, detailing forgotten knowledge. I am a skeptical man by nature, yet magic, with its mysterious allure, stirs my spirit in ways few can understand. I am no reckless soul. I spent years in study, honoring the teachings, respecting the boundaries of what we may and may not touch. And so, between scriptures and sleepless nights, I heard whispers of the Shem HaMephorash, the hidden name, the name which, if pronounced correctly, could elevate a man to something beyond what he is meant to be. They say that only the angels know the complete name, but legends hint that once a man uncovered it. His tongue, they say, never found rest afterward. He was consumed, they say, without ever finding peace, though only part of the legend seemed real to me. In my arrogance, I thought that perhaps I could unlock what he had failed to grasp. It was night. The oil lamp flickered, and my mind wandered between courage and madness. Before me lay an old parchment, weathered and covered in a veil of dust, sealed with the care only the ancients used. It lay there, promising power and hidden ruin. I unrolled it, reading syllable by syllable, letter by letter, the fragments of that name, sections of the unnameable. Each syllable seemed to echo in the silence, reverberating in the stones and my bones. I felt the room shrink around me, the air thick like lead. That was when I sensed something that hadn't been there before. A heat, not from the oil lamp, but from the earth beneath my feet, as if the ground was boiling. But I pressed on. I continued, driven by a force I couldn't, or perhaps didn't want to, resist. Then I heard a voice, rough as dried leaves, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. It whispered my name, my full name, with a tone that sounded almost like a summons, something familiar and foreign, like an ancient melody you haven't heard since childhood. I stopped, my hands trembling, the name still searing in my mind. "You're meddling with what you don't understand, Ephraim," the voice said, and I knew, as if the knowledge had seeped into my blood, that it wasn't a warning, but a certainty. Something began stirring in the darkness of the room. The outlines of the flickering light twisted, and suddenly, I felt watched by hundreds of invisible eyes, presences gathering in every corner, every crack, every shadow cast by the lamp. Then I saw a figure. It didn't walk, it floated. It was almost a reflection of me, but distorted, an older version, and fragmented, like a man made of fractures. I knew what it was. Part of me wanted to look away, but my eyes were fixed on it. It was a shadow of what I would become. "You sought wisdom that does not belong to you," it murmured, and its voice was a chorus of regrets, shattered promises, and knowledge I should never have sought. The figure drew closer and reached out a hand to me. The tips of its fingers, if they could be called that, touched my arm, and a burning coldness shot through me. For a fraction of a second, I felt the truth of the name, its weight. It was the answer and the question of everything, and in that moment of clarity, I knew. What I sought was not knowledge. It was a void, an abyss from which none could return. The eyes of that figure, hollow and fixed, turned on me with a pity that shattered the last of my pride. "Ephraim," it whispered, "there is no return. You cannot undo what has been spoken." I awoke in the same position, the parchment still in my hands, as though the night had swallowed hours of my life. I don't know how long I had spent there, but as I looked around, I realized something. Since that night, wherever I go, I see shadows following me, echoing in every corner, as if the walls themselves know the name and recite it back to me.
I lived in a small village on the outskirts of Oxford, England, surrounded by the cold winds sweeping off the Thames and the shadowy hills that twisted around the village, draped in thick, mysterious fog. On the surface, my routine seemed ordinary. Lectures at the university, where I taught the history of alchemy and ancient occult sciences. A comfortable, meticulous, and above all, disciplined life. Few knew that, in secret, I was devoted to the study and practice of magic. My area of interest, hermetic magic. Not the cheap tricks of illusionists, but the pursuit of ancient secrets preserved by the Renaissance Hermetics, hidden in books that weren't to be found in public libraries. I had access to rare texts, forgotten manuscripts with instructions on rituals, spells, and ancient formulas promising unspeakable feats. Yet my main motivation was the pursuit of expanded vision, a rare ability described in one of the medieval terms I had recently uncovered. According to the ancient scriptures, this spell would allow a man to see beyond human limitations, to uncover secrets veiled by darkness, and perceive truths that mortal eyes could never grasp. I imagined this would make me a sage, perhaps even a visionary, capable of understanding life and the universe beyond ordinary perception. One cold night, as the wind howled through the cracks in my window, I prepared the ritual with care. The instructions were clear. The spell had to be cast at midnight on a winter solstice when natural forces were at their peak. Each component, a mandrake flower, a raven's feather, and a piece of shattered mirror, held a precise place in the formula. In the background, I burned the necessary incense to open my inner eye, as the old Hermetics called it. I focused, whispering the archaic words, and soon felt the world around me transform. It was as if my senses were dissolving, each atom pulsing with pure energy. Terrifying, but intoxicating, and I pressed on, even as an unsettling fear crept down my spine. At first, I saw only shadows. It felt as if my eyes were touched by a presence, a being, or perhaps a secret, something intangible beginning to writhe in my vision. I tried to maintain control, but soon realized the error. The magic didn't just open my sight, it opened a door for something else to look back. That's when it all unraveled. The environment around me shifted as if veiled, the furniture wavered, candlelight flickered with a life of its own, and the walls seemed to distort. For a moment, I thought it was merely an illusion, a trick of the overloaded mind, until the shadows took form. A pale, hunched woman draped in a heavy cloak emerged in front of my mirror, her eyes fixed on me, as if in judgment. I knew who she was, or rather, what she was. The same entity that many magicians encountered in their search for truths beyond understanding. In silence, she raised her thin arm, pointing to the right side of my study. Following her gesture, I saw, to my horror, a shadow floating beside me, a faceless figure with a presence so intense it felt like it was crushing me. Then the screams began. Not mine, but from unseen figures I knew were nearby. Every corner of the room echoed with ancient voices, each one pleading, condemning, accusing. The walls started to contort as though a dark, deep current pulsed inside, threatening to expand and consume me. I could move. The freezing fear invaded my mind, and my vision was flooded with images of figures in torment, condemned to an eternity that seemed to never end. I understood then that what I had opened was not merely a window to higher understanding. It was a gateway to secret agonies that were never meant to be revealed. My hope of achieving expanded vision had transformed into a terrible burden. The knowledge I had so eagerly sought began to flood my mind, but instead of wisdom, they were memories and dark secrets of other magicians, of sorcerers long gone, consumed by the same boundless ambition that now made me shiver. One last scream filled the room before I collapsed to the floor, finally torn away from the mirror. When I rose, my vision was dim, distorted, and I knew that something within me had been removed, torn away. I touched my face, desperately searching for whatever it was, but felt only cold, empty skin. The entity vanished, and silence returned. My house was just as before, cold, ancient, now stripped of any warmth. But something within me had changed. I could see things, shadows creeping in the corners, a presence that seemed to observe my every movement, my every thought. I was still alive, but I was no longer the same. The price of the expanded vision was my own spirit, and I realized I would never see the world in the same way again.
It was the year 1532, and I lived in the heart of a city that no longer exists, buried beneath the ruins of civilizations that followed. Our village, far from the known routes, was governed by the cycles of water and the rhythm of the forest. There were few of us, and I was the only one who knew the ancient rites. My name doesn't matter. I'm merely a fragment of the forest, a guardian of what people call magic to us. It was simply our way of understanding the invisible. My journey was clear, mapped out since my early years, when the elders taught me to see beyond what ordinary eyes could bear. Daily, I split my time between teaching the young and guarding the village boundaries, renewing symbols and making simple offerings to the entities surrounding us. This was my routine, disciplined, meticulous. Until a shadow appeared, something invisible to the people, but as perceptible to me as poison in the air. It was an unyielding hunger, a threat I needed to understand, perhaps to contain. I decided it was time to summon an ancient entity, one my tribe had avoided for generations. Its name was lost to whispers of time, but I knew it as Kaima, the one who dwells in the root's embrace. They said he was the will of the forest, capable of guiding life or spreading ruin. No one had ever dared call on him because he charged a steep price, and they said disliked being disturbed, but I believed I was prepared. I spent days gathering the ingredients, each with a specific purpose. Blood from a fish of the deep river, bones of a bird that flew high and fell from sheer exhaustion, and a rare plant with a sweet and deadly scent. On the night of the invocation, everything was ready. I prepared the circle in the center of the clearing, lit the totem's flames, and at last I called. My voice resounded through the forest, and the ancient name flowed like a wound tearing the air. My intentions were pure, I believe. I sought help, protection for the village against the shadow that I feared would consume us. What I didn't know was that Kaima doesn't just hear the call, he probes the soul. My voice hadn't even finished echoing when I felt his presence, a deep weight, as though every root in the world twisted around me. Kaima's presence was a sea of silence and darkness, and for a moment I feared he would simply drag me beyond the trees. But he only observed. His voice wasn't a sound, but a terrible, pulsing idea that pierced my mind. He heard me, and he accepted my request, or so I thought. When the first sign appeared, I believed everything was going well. The birds disappeared, and the wind grew thick, heavy, as though something were breathing around us. This was Kaima's touch, I thought, preparing the forest, driving away the danger. But then, a child from the village disappeared. His body was found, but his face. It was as if he had glimpsed his own end, a fear so intense it froze his expression. I tried to perform the closing ritual, but Kaima did not respond. On the second night, one of the women vanished. The same expression, the same mark of pure terror. It was as if Kaima was playing with my village, savoring our fear like wine. It wasn't long before others began to whisper about a presence, something unspeakable lurking in the village. But it was too late. I had brought it into our home. Looking at the bodies, I knew Kaima wasn't warding off the threat. He was the threat. My nights became a vigil, as every sound seemed a harbinger. I felt Kaima's presence even in the quietest moments. On the last night, staring at my distorted shadow in the firelight, I realized what he wanted. It wasn't just a tribute or the protection I had sought. He wanted to break the line separating my village from the forest, to make every tree rise against humanity. Fear, pain, despair, all that fed the forest, giving him strength. Horror turned to fury, and fury to a final decision. I returned to the circle, this time with no tributes, no offerings, only my own blood and one intention: to free my people, no matter the cost. I chanted the reversal song, the expulsion ritual, calling upon the spirits of protection. The ground trembled, the trees whispered as if mocking me. And then, at the edge of darkness, I saw him. Kaima's form, indistinct, grotesque, made of roots and shadows, a mass of eyes that seemed to devour me from the inside out. He approached, and the cold was so profound that my heart nearly stopped. At that moment, I understood what he wanted. He couldn't be banished without a final offering. I let him into my mind, allowed him to see every memory, every fear, every despair, and then he stopped. Perhaps by some miracle, he was satisfied. Perhaps it was my own distress that sustained him. I would never know. Kaima vanished as he had come, taking with him only the emptiness, the shadow he himself had created. There were no celebrations in the village, and there was never a whisper about that night.